Right. Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Porter, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Commission's weekly webinar series where we cover a variety of topics that may be of interest to libraries. We broadcast the show live every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, but if you're unable to join us on Wednesdays, that's fine. We do record the show every week, as we are doing today, and it will be available for you to watch later at your convenience. Both the live show and the recordings are free and open to anyone to watch. So please do share with your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, anyone you think might be interested in any of the topics we have on NCompass Live. For those of you not from Nebraska, the Nebraska Library Commission is the state agency for libraries, so similar to your whatever state library. So we provide resources and training and databases and interlibrary loan and grants and services to all types of libraries in the state. So you will find shows on NCompass Live for all types of libraries: public, academic, K-12, corrections, museums, historical societies, archives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Really, our only criteria is that something to do with libraries. Sometimes we have Nebraska Library Commission staff come on the show and do present on programs or services or resources we're offering through the Library Commission, but we also bring on guest speakers, and that's what we have today. Joining us this morning is Nick Shimmin. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning.
And he is neighbor to the east of us from the North Liberty Library in Iowa. And this is one of the many shows that something else that we do here at the Library Commission, we do in conjunction with the Association for Rural and Small Libraries, ARSL. We do a Big Talk from Small Libraries online conference at the end of February every year. And we always get more proposals for that conference than we have time in one day to present. And so we invite some of those people who sent in proposals to Big Talk to come and NCompass Live, because we get lots of great presentations and want to make sure everyone can learn about what the people we're talking to talk about. And that's what we have today. Nick was a proposal for Big Talk. We ran out of space in our conference, and so we invited him to come on today to talk about fostering community connection through library events. So I am going to hand over to you, Nick, to take it away and tell us all about how we can do this at our libraries.
Okay, well, welcome. The first thing I want to do is make sure that when I advance the slide, you all see the slide advancing. So we're going to give that a shot, because that was
Okay.
one of the few things. Yep, okay, looks
Yep,
good.
yep, look good. Oh, and I will mention also, I should mention this beginning too. Normally we do have webcams up, but this morning GoToWebinar is having technical issues with being able to share cameras. So both of us were not able to do that. Sorry, you won't be able to see our faces this morning.
Yeah, I mean,
um,
normally, I mean, you can just imagine like Brad Pitt or something like that in your screen,
yeah,
and it'll be close, you know.
perfect.
Um,
Yes.
yeah. So I was told once that we should wait on welcomes, all the housekeeping at the first, because this is when you are paying the most attention. So I try to jump in on any of my presentations just right at the start. So in 2023, our former Surgeon General issued the advisory of the epidemic of loneliness in our country. And in that, he talks about the direct health effects that come from the increasing separation that the people in our communities are experiencing. It outlines the negative effects of the epidemic, but also not just talking about the bad. He also issues 6 pillars to overcome that. And then the very first pillar, he advises investing in local institutions that bring people together, like libraries, parks, and green spaces. So in that advisory, he directly calls on us to provide a direct positive emotional and physical impact on our communities. And I know this isn't quite as new as when I started doing this presentation, but I still like to cover this a little bit. I like this section to kind of talk about what he saw, and I'll give a little bit. I like to read this section from his advisory. So he says, loneliness is far more than just a bad feeling. It harms both individual and societal health. It is associated with greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. Given the profound consequences of loneliness and isolation, we have an opportunity and an obligation to make the same investments in addressing social connection that we've made in addressing tobacco use, obesity, and the addiction crisis. If we fail to do so, we will pay an ever-increasing price in the form of our individual and collective health and well-being. And we will continue to splinter and divide until we can no longer stand as a community or a country. Instead of coming together to take on the great challenges before us, we will further retreat to our corners, angry, sick, and alone. So you can see kind of the direct heaviness of this. Um, and you can also see that he kind of starts getting into the other topic that I have taken on. He says in here words like we will continue to splinter and divide, talks about our collective health, and talks about retreating into our corners, angry, sick, and alone. So while I started to take on this, I also decided, to try, working on another small issue, which was, of course, the polarization that we're seeing in the country. And so I decided to try and fix the social divide. Let's start small. This graph is a little old, but they do tend to study social divides when there's an election coming. And this was, of course, before Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris took over the position of the candidate for the Democratic Party. But as you can see, of all Americans, there were about 83% of people who felt that if the other side won, then democracy was broken. And I can't imagine nothing has really happened that made that feel a whole lot better. But yeah, I'm going to say that this is probably pretty similar. And I mean, just think about how many of you have lost a friend or a family member due to arguments of political events over the last, let's say, 4 to 8 years. So I decided to take this on. Our community is one of a few blue dots in Iowa, the sort of kind of the blue dot in Iowa, kind of like Nebraska's blue dot.
Same
So
here. Yep.
yeah,
Lincoln, Omaha. Yep. Yep.
yeah. So we have a lot of disagreement among members in our community. I grew up in a completely red area and have seen a ton of separation among family and friends. And by completely red area, I mean our choices for many positions were like which Republican candidate were you selecting for this position? They didn't even run Democratic candidates on the tickets. So so I've decided to try and fix this. If you ever taken a Strengths Finder test, one of my top ones is Fixer. So I see something broken and I try and fix it. As a side note, that works really well in personal relationships because people love when you try and fix problems with them. I'm being sarcastic. Normally, you would see that a little bit. Yeah, my wife loves this. Just huge benefit to our marriage. She is thrilled. So I set out to work on both of these, and as after working on it for a while, it turns out it's the same thing as Dr. Murthy hinted at in the Surgeon General's advisory. Again, we're talking basically about bringing people together. In polarization, we're talking about civic issues, how we talk about things civilly among one another, and they kind of feed off one another. Studies in turn now are showing that polarization is affecting health the same way isolation is, in part because they cause one another. So in it, I saw a shift in past library work from connecting members of the community and working with community entities to working with members who are no longer participating in community entities. I know in our locations we're seeing fewer members attending church, fewer members in parts of civic groups. So we're talking about people that people in general just are not participating with one another. So we're really looking at now creating the communities themselves. On the positive side of this, we are completely equipped to handle this. This is kind of what we've been doing anyway. We just have to be intentional about what we're doing. And so I wanted to talk about a little bit about the problems with this lack of isolation. If you read the advisory that the former Surgeon General put out, you will have seen these again. This isolation is as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's 3/4 of a pack of cigarettes every day. Increases the risk of premature death by 25%, the risk of heart disease by 29%, the risk of stroke by 32%, increases the risk of anxiety, depression, dementia, and the chance of becoming ill. So this also affects one in every two people that in our population. So this is affecting our community, ourselves, our staff, our friends, our family. So compare this to the thought of finding out that half the people you know are smoking 3/4 of a pack of cigarettes a day. So that's the health risk of this. Some data to show that we actually are um, diverting from one another. We'll see here the effect of the feeling of social isolation among our population, the decrease directly in actual household engagement. That's decreasing how much time we spend with people we directly live with, and then the loss of the feeling of companionship, the people that we feel like we should be companions with. And then we can see drops in a strong drop in social engagement with friends, social engagement with non-household family members, and the social engagement with others. Now, the interesting parts of these is you can see that these end in 2020. So we're not talking about the pandemic. We're not even talking
Mhm.
about the 2020 election. These all happened before then. There are two general pivot points where a lot of this data starts to drop or isolation goes up, engagement goes down. One of them is around the 2008-2009 recession, which basically was what
Mhm.
they feel is the lack of having money to go out and socialize. The other pivot point tends to be around 2013 and 2014. So again, prior to the 2016 election, um, a lot of conjecture is that this point is when we pass the 50% mark of people having smartphones. So there are studies and correlation between the two aspects of having basically your social media, your on your phones, and loneliness, but they're still really heavily debating whether there's that direct causation. Um, One recent study, I was looking for more data on that in preparation of this, and one found that they said the social media itself is not the issue, but the use of the social media is the problem, which I thought was very interesting. I think basically saying that the social media is not a problem, that's the problem here, but our use of it is. I don't know what the the purpose of that, what they were trying to say with that was, but it almost sounded like it was paid for by a social media company, but
Yeah, I
I couldn't
mean,
find
if
that
the
that was,
social media didn't if social media didn't exist, would
yeah,
this have happened?
yes.
I mean, yeah.
And
Ah.
so we can see what our social media looks like. You can see this is what our digital media use is. Whoops, my mouse is just not being friendly. Okay, this is pretty telling. And again, this stops at 2018. This is prior to the pandemic, when I'm
Mhm.
sure this did not get lighter. Um, Far
Yeah.
and far more use of our mobile devices. And what do we use our mobile devices for? Typically, email, a lot of social media. Um, so, I mean, why is this an issue? Facebook was, if you remember back that far, if you were part of that, was supposed to bring us all together, regardless of where we lived. Um,
Mhm.
so basically, rather than spending time with people around us, we've got our noses in our phone. Normally, I would like you would picture me raising my hand. Like, anybody have that family member where you're never the focal point in the discussion? Their nose is in their phone. Yeah. So even when we're together, we've got our noses on our phone. We're not spending time with the people that we live with, which also makes us feel more isolated and less happy. Um, the other is how our brains work with social media. There's a general tendency to think that what you're seeing on any social media platform is what your friends are talking about. But really, of course, it's the computer algorithm, the computer program showing you the stuff that's designed to make you angry or upset because that is what grabs your attention. That's the way we're built. We've been um, trained to think of the negative things far more than the positive things because we were looking for survival when we were part of tribes. The negative things were much more problematic. So our brains work to focus on problems. Um, but those problems were more like, where's our next meal coming from? How do we keep how do we not be attacked by some sort of predator? Now it's pushing our buttons to make us feel like our group, our political group is being attacked, or our um, ideological group that we feel like we're a part of. and that makes us keep looking at the screen. So that leads to siloing and polarization. Apparently, I can't talk this morning. Um, and this is kind of what we see. We can see back to 1994, and we'll look at how our political values have shifted over this time period. So here's 2011. You can see us starting to shift, and that's what we have as of 2017. Again, that's the most recent data. That was 7 years ago, so probably not having gotten better. The Webster's word of the year in 2024 was polarization, so definitely something that um, we are still dealing with naturally. And I want to give you sort of a couple scenarios on how isolation, not participating with our friends and families, affects our political isolation as well. So, on one, I've got a situation where you rarely see a member of your extended family, except maybe Thanksgiving or Christmas. You cannot talk about politics at Thanksgiving and Christmas because you don't want to ruin your holiday. So, those like coming in, don't talk about politics. Don't talk about these issues. Um, this member of your family, begins to regularly share posts on Facebook that you really disagree with. You start to comment on them because you feel like you feel differently and you want to offer counterpoints. You're not able to read facial cues or tones in their voice. We've been speaking person to person for thousands of years. That's what we are geared towards doing. Um, we've been communicating online for 20 years, so we don't know how to do that effectively. Naturally, as we start to argue these points, the argument gets heated. 8 months later, a lot of hurt feelings. You've blocked each other on Facebook. You both feel the same way politically, but now you've lost each other. You've lost a family member, basically. Second, you see your extended family every other week for Sunday dinner. It's a regular gathering, so you just talk about whatever. There's nothing off the table. You discuss how you feel about political issues, so you kind of understand your backgrounds and your feelings. They have, they really feel this one way, and so that bleeds into this one political issue. They start to post on Facebook things that you disagree with, but you know where it's coming from. You know their thoughts and their feelings, and you kind of say, okay, that's just where that's coming from. Um, and even though you don't agree, just kind of go about your day. And then while you disagree, you'll see them next Sunday, and you hope they bring that casserole that you really like, and life just goes on while you're still connected. And by talking, you can both kind of see and move how each other think, and kind of meet more in the middle, which is not what we're having as we saw with that that beginning or that process of dividing in our country. So now, after we've gone through all that heaviness, I'm going to do my welcomes because that's a good place
Everybody's
to
still
shift.
here? Everybody's still good?
Yeah. Um, so first of all, about me, I know. Well, I'm speaking to people all over the world or all over the country, but I planned this for primarily Nebraskans. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background. I grew up in Western Illinois, literally surrounded by corn and soybean fields. My high school no longer exists because the population was too small. So you
Mm.
know, the small locations is kind of my background. I went to the University of Illinois in mathematics and computer science, and then to grad school at Indiana University. Um, and then I moved to Iowa to become a director of a small town of 2,500 people, which is of course right next to Iowa City, the home of the University of Iowa. So I used to say that I was kind of making a tour of Big Ten schools, um, which now the Big Ten is far too big, and that's not really something that I'm able to do. But the chance that I sometimes reside in Lincoln is non-zero. Like there's definitely a possibility given my background in where I live. Um, and my background, basically, I started as a library director in 2007, 2008. I started off with two major hubs of why I focused on building community. One is we had the post from R. David Lankus, who said, "Bad libraries build collections, good libraries build services, great libraries build communities." As a young director,
Yep.
naturally, I wanted to have a great library. So I'm going to work on building communities. I worked with community organizations as much as I could. Really wanted to make the community the hub of what we were doing. Around the same time, the Blue Zone project came out. Dan Buettner presented at the State Library of Iowa conference one year, and I was a big fan. Um, and the Blue Zone project, if you're not familiar, looked at 5 or 6 locations around the world and tried to figure out the commonalities of these communities to figure out why they lived the longest in the world. And 5 of the 9 points that he comes away with were specifically about having purpose, about having people and meaning in your life. Again, just community connection is the key to living a long life. So naturally, I wanted my community, not only my library to be great, but I wanted my community to be happy and healthy. So basically, we worked on that for however long. Um, I don't want to think. I can tell you, but I don't want to. I think it was 15 years. Now I'm aging myself. So now you're looking not just at Brad Pitt in your mental model, but like an older Brad Pitt. So we'll go with that. Um, but that's where we kind of went through. And there are definitely some big names and big works on the social isolation in libraries and how libraries fit into that. But as I said, I'm a fixer. I like things written out. So my goal here was to provide sort of a goal, like a plan for how to do this, as well as kind of talking about how some of our work has gone in the past, so that you're not starting from scratch. So I've developed this planning structure. Basically, you start with intention. This is saying I want to affect community connection. I want to bring people together, as opposed to some of the program planning or service planning where you're just like, this sounds like something that is fun. This is useful. I You go at this directly from the I want to bring people together and how do I structure a program to do that. The second is who in your community needs this connection. You have to talk to people. Um, we found out a lot through focus groups, both at my prior position and at this position, about who in the community at most needs this connection. And I'll show you what our demographics look like here in North Liberty. You can see there's huge bumps in the uh, sort of the, I would say, 25 to 50 age range, and then again, young. We are a community of very young families who are gradually aging, but primarily a place where young families live. One of the things that we found out through talking to people is that behind this is a group of older people that are moving into our community to be near their families. So these are grandparents moving closer to their kids and their kids. So these are people who are moving into the community. Um, they're looking to downsize. They don't have any community connection here. They don't have friends. They don't have other family here other than their kids and their grandkids. Um, Many of them have lost a spouse, which is very likely why they need to downsize at this particular point. So this group is really the ones who are feeling that push of isolation the most. And that's why it's important to figure out who you need to target within your community. In many rural areas, the population is aging. Um, so you may actually find that in your community, the most isolated are younger people. People moving into the community just happen to be like in their 20s or 30s, and there just aren't that many 20s and 30s in your community. Um, where is a big one. The library is wherever librarians are doing work. It doesn't have to be within our walls. Figure out where when you're going through that intention of trying to figure out how to design this. Make sure that you're not sticking to the library itself. We can be wherever and still carry out good library programming and events. This is a big one. Understand your desired outcome, which I mean, step back from your stats. I've been that young director trying to validate, our good work and talking about, like maybe you don't get as many people, but you get repeat people, and you
Mm.
need repeat people in a smaller group in order to form connection. So you really do have to kind of do that mental step back from your stats, which is harder to do than it is to say. So I understand how that is. Um, but there's a quote here that I have from Van Gogh: "Great things are done by series of small things brought together," which is kind of where I'm going with this. I will say that they do happen to be generally repeat programs, and I'll talk about that in a second. So you boost your programming attendance through repetition as opposed to one big program. So you'll have, let's say, 15 people over 10 weeks or 10 programs as opposed to 150 people at a single program. And I know some small libraries that's like we don't get 150 people. The same thing scales. If you get 6 people together regularly on a weekly basis and you do that for 10 weeks, that's 60 people, which is a great small library program. The other one is repetition. It requires medically it requires 10 connections with a person to create a neural link that they are familiar and that they are possibly a friend. It only requires short recurrences, but it does require 10. So you can meet somebody like briefly, like for 5 minutes, and that counts as one. Unfortunately, if you meet for 45 minutes, that still only counts as one. But you do need at least 10 to kind of create that friendship, that community neural link. Then the bonus points if you're overcoming a hurdle, because that makes people into a team and they are more likely to just coalesce as a team. So I'm going to go through a little bit of how we've approached different things throughout different age groups. With the very young, they probably don't need a ton of connection. We're talking about up to probably second grade. They rely on their parents and their family for their sense of self, for their sense of purpose. When they get probably to the third grade and up, they start to trying to figure out where they fit in the world on their own. The library, as we know, is a great place for those kids who don't fit in anywhere else. Um, Bonus points if you, like I said, if you're overcoming an obstacle together. Escape rooms, things like Girls on the Run. There's a boys version of that called Let Me Run, I believe it is. Let me run. Um, and so we had a chance to do this, and I think this is one of the best um, programs that I've ever had. This is an actual photo. This isn't staged. This was a group of third and fourth graders that were working on practicing to do a 5K. We uh, Let Me Run, I believe, is now operating. I've seen them working. I've seen a group out in the community, but they were on hiatus due to the pandemic, which is when we started this. So we developed this. We kind of cobbled together a Couch to 5K program for the kids, and um, and it worked wonderfully. People that didn't feel like the kids that they didn't feel like they fit in really well. We were very clear that there is no point to winning. Like you get nothing for winning. You get all the joy from everybody finishing. That is where the goal is. You want everybody to finish. That is what our purpose here is. Um, so the prior community I worked in is West Branch, Iowa, which is the home of Herbert Hoover, or the birthplace and the resting place of Herbert Hoover. So we of course called our group Hoover's Movers, which I was not super fond of, but we did get this wonderful logo, which I'm like, okay, that's worth it. The running Herbert Hoover is I will stay with. Um, but yeah, I would say that any time that you can get these groups together where they're trying to overcome something, this can be, like I said, escape rooms, tag groups, just a regular group where they can get together. The kids that don't have those sports teams that they participate in, if you don't have maybe a um, like a show choir for that age, this is the library is where they can come to connect. I'm going to move up to younger adults, sort of our parent age groups. We're going to start with the young parents and sometimes grandparents. who are working with taking care of their kids during the days or just taking care of their kids at night. You are extremely isolated. You're a slave to bedtimes, nap times. You have to have somebody who will watch over the kids at any particular point. Um, and as we know, um, we have a lot of programming already for this age group. As you can see in this image, a story time. Um, now I like this. This isn't one of our events. This is one of them, but I like this picture because it shows something. And here we do a lot more of parent and kid involvement. But my past job, it was more like this, where you have the parent standing in the background, um, and they're just kind of milling about. It was in Palaces for the People, the book, that book where he suggested a program called Stay and Play, and you don't have to do anything official like this, but provide a meaningful gathering for these parents to get together, provide some coffee, maybe some snacks in the back. Of course, the kids are going to get the snacks, hopefully not the coffee, but give them an opportunity and a method to congregate and to form that community. Um, the bonus point, or the key is you've already identified who it is. It's repetitive. It's usually weekly or even multiple times. And the bonus point, of course, is overcome the challenges of parenting. Um, at any point, these parents here are probably going to have to run and change a diaper or something like that, or tell the child to get something out of their mouth. But that's just part of being parenting, and very um, that'll be a good way of them connecting. And so I have a story with this because this actually happened in our prior library. We didn't try anything specific, but there was a day which I can still remember where our youth librarian came into me as a director and said, "We have a problem with our story time." And of course, that's a great phrase as a director. We have a problem. Always starts well, and is a great thing. I'm thinking, there's a problem with one of the families, with one of the kids. There's, Lord knows what can be happening. She says, the parents are being too loud. We had a regular group that came to the library for their social connection every week, and they continue to come even as their kids grew up through elementary school. And long after the traditional storytime age, they showed up even when we didn't have storytime for their social hour. They made a book once about coming to the library when we didn't have storytime, which is bound and available at the West Branch Public Library. Um, and completely, I feel so bad for our staff members at the time because they asked to tie them up, and so there's a picture in the book of our staff members tied to their chairs, and I'm like, they probably don't get paid enough for that. But
Yeah.
and they probably also worried, like, what did they find out? What happens when, like, I find out that all of this craziness was going on to take these pictures in the library while I was gone? Um, But they also, not only did they form their community, but they also started to bring other people in. They said, "Oh, I just met this person in our neighborhood. They just moved in. Come to story time. It's where we come to socialize." So we tried, again, moving them about a little bit farther back so that they didn't interfere as much with story time. And eventually, this dedicated group that we had became some of the strongest advocates for the library. They became leaders of our friends, members of our board. They helped plan programs for adults. And after a while, they actually asked us why they couldn't have craft snacks and refreshments for adult programs. And so we developed programs for that. We went through the process, and we ended up calling this series Library After Hours. Um, Again, it was their basic idea. They just wanted to get together as adults. In a small town, the outlet for gathering was the local bar. And like with the sports teams for the kids, not everybody fits in or wants to go to the local bar for gathering. So we developed these programs that we try to run once a month, twice a month. Um, we went through the whole process of getting the city ordinance changed so that alcohol could be allowed in the library. We felt like we had to step up our game, provide a welcoming and relaxing atmosphere for the people who are coming in. I'm not advocating alcohol use, but if you're trying to provide a social gathering for an adult
Mhm.
population, you usually have to make it accommodating. You have to think that they're coming off of a hard week, they're finally getting out of the house, and they just want to relax.
Yeah, we have someone actually commenting about that, the alcohol. And I know we've had this here in our Omaha Public Library, if, at
Mhm.
least. It's interesting they had to change the ordinance because they said we were just able to get a 1 day or 1 night liquor license, like a temporary one. So that might be a way to do it as well, and depending on how your community is.
Yeah, I think in Iowa it's a little bit tougher to get an alcohol license, and you have to talk about insurance and that sort of thing, which is why we tried to
Sure, sure.
avoid doing that. And I mean, again, I've been running this type of event for years, and I've never had um, any alcohol issues. Most of the time,
Mhm.
they just wanted to chat with a friend.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Now, I would say that one of the things is that these craft events did not technically form communities the way we were hoping to. They did provide some place for friends to gather, but it didn't really form other connections. We did have one community spring up, and that was our movie night crowd. So since it was a simpler event and it was more repetitive, the group started making special meals and snacks to share. They brought cake for people's birthdays. They brought wine to share. They started bringing in other friends. They had a little social group beforehand, and then they would watch a movie together just within the library. The other idea for this that I've seen work really well is um, knitting and crocheting. It's picking up, I think, some traction with younger adults as well because of TikTok and Instagram, people really liking to make things. This can really happen with any hobby, but knitting and crocheting are some of the more prolific places to start. Yoga, meditation, walking, board games, scrapbooking, any of those can work really well. Um, the bonus part is you can really make use of whatever your hobby is and or a member of the community's hobby and provide that initial starting connection. And I know D&D would work for this. I keep trying to do it with D&D, but it just doesn't work. As
Yeah.
anybody who knows who's participated in D&D, the biggest enemy that people face in any campaign is scheduling. So
Yes.
that is,
Yes. I have. Yes. I'm. My husband and I are big gamers. We have this with our
yeah,
friends as well. Yes.
yes. So that is the difficulty with D&D. Although I feel like it would be ideal for it, it's just super hard to do in a
Mhm.
library setting for this particular process. Um, and if you don't have a social knitting group, we have one here that began as a library program many years ago, and now has a life of its own. We tried to we basically are at the point where the group is a little too big. They've completely taken over an area every Tuesday night, and we're not sure what to do with that. But you can also, if you don't have that, you can start it. We offered a program where people could learn to knit, and so we had, as you can see, people of all age groups kind of showing up to learn how to knit. They just wanted a new hobby. They wanted to gather, and of course, we tried to feed them off into the routine social group so that they can have that community as well. The best part is for a lot of these, it requires very little prep. Maybe some snacks, refreshments, and then just circle some chairs and let people go. Um,
Mhm.
I need to kind of hurry up, I think, a little bit. Okay, so seniors, I want to say first off that there are I say there are two groups of seniors. There are the younger groups of seniors and then the older groups of seniors. Um, Someone who is 65 is probably different than somebody who is 95 in their experiences, their abilities, and their day to day life. The earlier retired community can easily fit into your other events, and many of them do. They tend to be still active, getting up and going. That's what I had in my previous community at our movie nights. It was that younger community or that younger senior population. Um, they are usually far harder to get a hold of. Um, tend to be active during the day, but they still possibly are a little bit more hesitant to drive after dark to get around that way. As they age, um, and you get older members of the community, then they have a little bit more trouble doing some of the craft work that you find. We are lucky here that we have a Friday lunch called 55 Plus Connections, and they meet every Friday, and they have a social hour lunch, and then either a presenter or bingo, and they love bingo. So that usually is our big draw. Then they actually have started playing euchre afterwards, so there's an additional community that meets there. They requested more from us, so we started a Tuesday group that we just call our 55 plus Tuesday gathering. And we rotate puzzles, board games, a book discussion, and a craft. And strangely enough, they provide specifically different populations for each of those. We have people who show up for the puzzles and not the games, and vice versa. And the book discussion group is completely different. Um, we give them coffee, donuts, and allow them to socialize. But we try and be an intentional, large puzzle pieces, crafts that don't involve a lot of careful control, and the same with games. We had the idea of showing movies like it worked before, but it hasn't kind of worked out that way. So um, we kind of abandoned the movies, even though it worked in my prior. So to go on to talking specifically about working on polarization in terms of providing these community groups, we're trying to fix these silos. This is, again, probably anybody in their adult age groups. We've tried to get younger people in, the teen groups in, but that's harder, been definitely harder to do, especially on a repeat meeting schedule. There are a lot of uh, groups that are already working on this, and you may be um, familiar with some of these. We've done several living room conversations, and they work really well. They're already pre-made guides, ready to go. Personally, I find them a little bit soft on the questions when you want people to open up. So I've rearranged those a little bit. Braver Angels offers a lot of education workshops that can be held as library events. The difficulty with them is, while they do things extremely well, they're generally looking to have equal numbers of reds and blues, as they call them, which is not necessarily easy to do. Um, so we have yet to make a ton of use of Braver Angels, even though I think they're a great organization. Um, and then one small step, StoryCorps is working on this initiative. They've been doing the person-to-person recordings for quite a while. Now they're working on expanding that into library events, and we were lucky enough to be part of the initial group. And I think we have a meeting next week on the next cohort of what they're working towards there. But that's something definitely to watch. They're working on getting groups together, and we got to test some of that. It was actually kind of funny. The grant application that StoryCorps put in, for some reason, I won't get into. We got included in that, but it was like Brooklyn Public Library, Wichita Public Library, the state of Colorado, the state of Virginia, I believe, and then the North Liberty Library, and they specifically documented this North Liberty Library in Iowa, in eastern Iowa, and like that because they don't think anybody's going to know where you guys are. But that was just that was an interesting process, and hopefully they'll have some more coming out soon. We also had this organic group called the Good Neighbor Book Club, and we have this group. I thought initially nobody's going to sign up for this 4 to 6 week book discussion. Our purpose was to work on talking through divides to rebuild our communities through the avenue of a book. I don't actually like the term book club in this because I don't think that book club appropriately talks about what we're trying to do. But we actually have our third session starting up in a couple weeks. And this time we're going to be using Fragile Neighborhoods by Seth Kaplan. We started off with I Never Thought of It That Way by Monica Guzman, and then The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. This group has grown into a very close-knit group. They hold reunions between. They're actually looking at creating a mission and vision statement to know how to branch out from just these gatherings. But they are specifically looking at how to build and rebuild our community, both in terms of isolation and with political issues. I would say the difficulties that we had on this is getting members from across the aisle. Since we are a blue dot, it's really hard to get our reds in the community to feel comfortable like they're coming in. It does require some active recruiting of reds on our part, or blues if you're in a red area. One of the woman who I started this with considers herself conservative, and has had a few sessions where she's had to come back the next time and say, "Whoa, that was too much. Like that was across the line."
Mm.
But for the most part, I think the biggest issue was people are just like, "Well, what do conservatives think about this? What do conservatives think about this?" And she's just like, "I can't speak for an entire side of the country. Like that doesn't. I can't do
Right,
so."
right, yeah.
and so that has worked really well. And like I said, they're looking at how to take this even farther. And so I feel like at this point, even though I helped start this, I feel like I'm kind of along for the ride, and we'll see how it goes from here. Um, and so I provided some references here, and on getting kind of up to this, we've got the two primary things from Dr. Murthy, um, his general advisory, as well as the parting prescription. The parting prescription for America is no longer on the Health and Human Services website, but he has it on his website. Um, Currently, the advisory on the epidemic of loneliness is still on the Health and Human Services website, but I don't know how long that will last. Um, there's a WebJunction webinar which I found very useful when I was starting out, as well as there's this article that was written in the end of 2024 on the epidemic of loneliness. My favorite books on this, I never thought of it that way. The Righteous Mind, I thought was wonderful, talking about why liberals and conservatives feel different ways about different things. High Conflict, I think, is also wonderful, as well as Super Communicators, which talks about how to talk to people regardless of what their viewpoints are. In terms of bringing people together, The Art of Gathering talks about just gathering in general, whether it's from members of the community or whether it's like a group of friends. Palaces for the People, I think people know about with libraries, and he has some great ideas in there, as well as the newer book, Meet Me at the Library by Shimichael Hallman. Again, my point with this is while you have Eric Kleinenberg and then Shimichael Hallman talking about this on a grand scale, I always feel like I wanted to provide a roadmap, so that's why I've started doing this. And I guess that's and I would say Dr. Murthy has a book called Together. I found it not as useful having read these two articles, just kind of echoing and expounding on what he said there. But
Mm.
my director is currently reading it, and she found it wonderful. So,
Mm.
two different things. And then I guess I'll just take
Different,
questions
yeah,
if
different
there
things
are.
connect, different
Yeah.
people connect to different things. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody have any other questions? Type into the questions section of your GoToWebinar interface. There's a button at the top, with a question mark on it that you can click on. It will open up where you can type in. Um, if you have any questions about Nick's presentation, about anything he spoke about, or any of your ideas or thoughts on the issues of loneliness and separation and what libraries can do. Or there's some cool things that you've done at your library, some events you've held that have been very successful, or not. We learn from the things that are not so successful as well. Um, Please do type into the questions section. This was a very good session, a very good presentation, Nick. I'm glad we were able to have you on to talk about this. The loneliness thing, I think a lot of people, and I assumed too, it was going to be, the pandemic caused everything, but no, we were already having issues before
Yep.
that. But yeah, and as you mentioned, so that was something that I learned that I was not expecting. Um, but there's more to it than just that. But like
Hmm.
you said, it definitely, I'm sure, has made it not made it any better. Um,
And I'll say one of the fun things is when you're doing this, you also get to you get to be part of the communities too. So it's also very fulfilling for yourself.
mhm.
Like I love working with our senior community. They are such a diverse and funny group. One of my first experiences was a woman who has now passed. She was 91, 92 the first time I worked there. She came in with an aide, um, and you know came in. She leans over to me and she's just like, "I'm just here to raise hell." And I'm like, "Okay, good to know."
Thanks for the warning.
Yeah.
Nice. That's the kind of, definitely the kind of attitude you want. Yeah, go into it that way. Um, Someone did make a comment here, that wondering if after the pandemic, when the pandemic started, when the COVID-19 pandemic started, and we were all at home more, um, some people did have people actually maybe it didn't get as bad as we thought because we had to use social media or online resources or online things like that to connect with anybody because we couldn't go out and physically be together for quite for quite a few years, and for some people still they can't go out because there's still COVID is still out there,
Yeah,
and the pandemic has not gone away, and there are people who are immune compromised. Yeah,
yeah.
I have that in my family, but wondering if maybe it did teach people a better way to use social media, hope possibly. I know my mom, she's in New York, she's in her 70s, she's in a book group, a book club that she's been in for years and years with a group of women friends of hers, and they switched to doing it on Zoom when the pandemic started. Um, and they still get together every Sunday night on Zoom.
Hmm.
Just as a regular thing. And they still do things in person as well now, but they still do that. So they've kind of learned a new way to connect.
It's definitely possible. I mean, my family group of friends had routine um, movie nights during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not sure. I would say that given our work over the last couple years here, I can't say that there feels like there's been a whole lot of um, nicety that has come back into it. Maybe in terms of isolation, but I think um, at least Dr. Murphy still felt that way to issue his parting prescription
Oh yeah, yeah.
document. And I mean the polarization is definitely still a huge issue that I mean
Mm-hmm.
I
Definitely.
felt very down, I would say, after the election, not in the election results themselves, but in just how people were handling it
Mm.
and not willing to talk across not willing to talk to people across the aisles, calling names, just not.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a known thing too that and you kind of mentioned it here when you had those two scenarios, but um, people will say things online that they would not say to your face.
100%.
And they will type things out there that are much more divisive than when they're in front of you and having to, as you said in your scenarios there, seeing the expression on the person's face, seeing how they're reacting to it, or just being brave enough to
Yeah,
say something to someone's face. They'll type it out online, and then it will go,
yeah,
things will go badly. Yeah, 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 and things will, be much more to make it worse. Yeah, and
yeah,
that's just been
definitely.
a yeah. People are braver when they're behind their keyboard than when they're sitting right next to you.
And I think it's both on both sides where you're not able to read the physical.
Hmm.
You're not able to read who you're talking to, but then you're also not able. The other people are not able to read how it was issued.
Right.
So you'll have somebody put something out about one topic, and but you don't know the background of why um, they feel that way.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to remember um, there was a book that talked about bringing people across aisles on a divide. I believe it was gun control. And they brought people together, and one would be people who would post, just purely pro gun control. One people would be purely, anti-gun control. But then when you actually learned about the individuals, one person had been attacked, and she felt that trying to remove her ability to carry self-defense was
Hmm.
stripping her of her freedom, like not in the big freedom, but like her ability to feel safe.
Right, right.
Whereas you also had somebody whose child had been killed in a school shooting. So you have two very distinct um, bullet points that you're putting out online, but you're missing the background that they each need to talk to one another to kind of make those compromises to make the world better, really. So I think that is the key that we're missing by doing stuff online. And as I said, I'm a computer science guy. If there's not a problem that can be solved, or if a problem can't be solved by charts and graphs and an Excel spreadsheet, I'm not sure how to do it. But when
Yeah.
I'm sitting here like saying, this online the social media stuff is probably not going well. I feel like that carries a little bit more. Like I've looked at how this works a little bit, and after me being like, oh, this tech thing is really cool, then say, like, maybe not a great idea.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Data, numbers and data is very compelling. The actual, yeah, absolutely. All right. Does anybody have any? We're almost up to 11 o'clock, the top of the hour when we officially start wrapping things up here. Anybody have any desperate last minute questions they want to ask of Nick or anything you want to share from your libraries? Type into the questions section. Anything here? New. Okay. I can't see if you're typing, so I have to wait for it to come up after. Oh, we got some thank yous coming through. Thank you. Yep. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right.
And I cannot see chat at all, I don't think. So,
No, I
right.
keep an eye on that for you. Not a problem. Yep.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
all for attending.
Yeah. All right. I am going to see if I can do this here. Pull presenter control back to my screen, I think. Yes, I did. Nice. Okay. We have a new, if anyone of you who've been on our show, attended our show before, you may notice that the interface has changed, updated. GoToWebinar made some updates, so things are in a little different places now, but it still works. Yeah. So yes, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Nick. I'm so glad we got to come on. This is great, and hopefully we'll have more people using some of these tips to get more people into their library and creating more communities. Definitely, libraries are a great place for this to happen. I think whether the library starts it up, or in some of your case with some of those some of the parents you mentioned, they do it themselves. So today's show is recorded. If you go to if you type in NCompass Live, the name of our show, and your search engine of choice, you will find our main page and our recording page. This is our main NCompass Live page. Our upcoming shows are listed here, and our archives are right here. Most recent show will be here at the top of the page. I've got to download the recording and do some possible editing to it. Should be up by the end of the day tomorrow. Everyone who attended today's show and registered for today's show will get an email from me when we announce it out to our mailing list, letting you know that the recording is here. We also use our social media. We have a go back there. Yeah, we have a Facebook page for NCompass Live for the show. So if you'd like to use Facebook, give us a like over there. You'll get notifications. Here's your reminder to log into today's show right before it started this morning. Reminders about what's coming up next week, and then when the recordings are available. We also post that on here. You can see we also use the hashtag, a little abbreviation of our show name, NComp Live. Anywhere we post NCompass Live, the show itself has its own Facebook page. The Library Commission has an Instagram account and Twitter, and we put things out on there as well. While I'm here on the archived page, I'll show you. We have a search feature here if you want to see if we've done a show on a particular topic that you might be interested in. You can search the full show archives or just the most recent 12 months if you just want something very current. That is because this is our full show archives, and if you can see over here, there's a teeny little scroll bar. I'm not going to go all the way to scroll down because this is a huge list, as you can see, but this is our full show archives going back to when NCompass Live first premiered, which was in January 2009. So 2025 is the 17th year of our show. Oh my gosh. But we have all of our show recordings here, all of our previous shows. So just pay attention to the original broadcast date of anything you watch. It all has a date there, so you know when it first happened. Some of the shows we find to watch stand the test of time, still be good resources, but there will be some things, resources have changed since the original show. People may no longer work at the same place where they worked at when they presented for us. Links may be broken. So just pay attention to that original broadcast date. But this is something libraries do. We keep things for historical purposes. And as long as we have a place to host it, which right now is on the Library Commission's YouTube channel, we will always keep all of our show archives up there for people to watch. All right, so that's all for today's show. Yeah. Um, Next week we will doing a it's a more Nebraska centric presentation, but you can definitely get some ideas from it. We have a one book for Nebraska kids and teens program here in Nebraska. There's some one book for Nebraska statewide, or certain cities have these one book programs. Our staff here at the Library Commission, Sally Snyder, our coordinator of children and young adult library services, and Amy Owen, one of our librarians here, work to put together a one book program for kids and teens. And they'll be on the show next week to talk about the titles for 2025. Lions and Liars by Kate Beasley for the kids, and Where You See Yourself by Claire Forrest for the teens. So please do sign up for that show. You see, I've got some open dates here in April and May. I'm working on filling those, so just keep an eye on our schedule here for any of our upcoming shows and to see when I get new items added. All right. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, Nick. This was awesome. And hopefully we'll see you all on a future episode of NCompass Live. Bye-bye.